guys on foot. Got a guy aiming.
Carnage.
Hit him. Got that motherfucker.
Camping on claymores. Sandals. Creepy Nazi guns. Kazakhstan. More camping on claymores. Quasi mutton chops. Noob tubes.
Care package ready.
Conspicuously missing microtransactions. Gun porn. Goat porn. The Jihadi Remote Control Plane Association. Tough decisions. Tougher decisions. Murdering civilians. Terrorist teddy bears. Baghdad's favourite TV show. Ethnic cleansing. Welcome to Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Who would have thought that war crimes could be so much fun? Warning, this video contains views that may differ from your own and might hurt your feelings. Call of Duty is an omnipresent feature of the video game landscape. Every year, EA is compelled to snap on a pair of latex gloves, breathe a heavy sigh and begrudgingly stroke out yet another episode in what has become one of gaming's most tired and cliched franchises. And make no mistake, this process is more reminiscent of someone cracking one off in a sperm donation clinic rather than any form of recreation. It's an entirely transactional exchange, not an exercise in sexual self-pleasure. This year, however, something strange has happened. Admittedly, there is definitely still many of the same features associated with the game. The grindy Skinnerbox unlock PvP hamster wheel. The horrors of EA's monetization strategy has been hidden away for the first month. And everyone is screaming at me in PvP for being a lazy camping bastard.
That gave them something to think about. Good work.
But the single player campaign has returned in force with some fairly brutal content, and it's made all the more special by virtue of the fact that it's being released in the middle of a historical period which will probably become known as the Great Wokening. So what is Call of Duty Modern Warfare? Call of Duty Battle COD 16 is a first-person shooter with a single-player campaign. It's a military game where you kill people for lols, set in the current era with flashbacks to events in the recent past. The player takes on multiple gendered and ethnically diverse roles and explores a story of international intrigue, the horrors of war, human suffering, and stitching up the Russians, because everything evil that happens in the world can ultimately be traced back to Uncle Boris, right? Even terrorism, apparently. The single-player campaign is reminiscent of combat theatres, historical incidents, and popular entertainment such as Benghazi, Generation Kill, 13 Hours, the Paris attacks, Zero Dark 30, the Iraq insurgency, Black Hawk Down, and Desert Storm. The player versus player online element, as per fucking usual, is like working a shift in a secure clinic for children with personality disorders, aggression issues, and attention deficit syndrome. Only now, everyone has guns, and the kids have been given walkie-talkies to screech into. This is definitely a game of two halves. The brutal and frankly intriguing single-player campaign, and the oh so tired but satisfactory multiplayer. But before we grab our shovels and take this dog for a short walk in the woods, I should qualify. I am playing on PC. I have completed the single player campaign. I love gruesome violence and realism in video games. I'm nearly level 40 in PvP. I'm so terribly shit at PvP that if there was an FPS Hall of Fame, they would reserve a special place for me there. I don't know, maybe a urinal shaped like my head, with my mouth open, or something like that. So don't no folks get triggered by me using these claymores in the footage. Think of it like it's a sickness, or an addiction. So let's talk functionality. Holy fucking shit! The Infinity Ward opening title screen when you start up the game is a fucking offence. The volume is frankly so loud it qualifies as a physical assault. If I turn my volume down so low it sounds normal, the game itself, by comparison, is fucking silent. I mean, what the actual fuck, guys? Edit the WAV file, you lazy scrubs. I was personally still keybinding after days of playing. There was a distinct lack of context-specific binds. I preferred WASD in a vehicle and ASDF in first-person shooting, and these were hard-baked together across vehicles and on foot, causing some serious cross-keyboard button leaps. I'm not playing fucking Chopin on my keyboard, and I shouldn't need to. Binds should be context-specific. Every time I rebound something, it would fuck something else up. I shit you not, I even managed to rebind in a way so I kept accidentally switching seats. Let's just say, I won't be getting a helicopter license based on my Call of Duty gameplay footage. There is the usual loadout system with unlockable loadout slots. A nice touch is that you can now save custom individual weapon configs with the mods of your choice. E.g. you might set up an M4 for stealth, and you might want to go full DPS, or attach a noob tube. Overall, it's fairly typical Call of Duty fare. No shocks, no surprises, and a few improvements, unless I just missed them in the last game, of course. All the good stuff like field of view and frame rate were there, so at the end of the day it wasn't cripplingly bad at least. So let's talk gun porn. Lots of old favourites like the P90, M4 and SCAR, Mark 14/EBR variants, and a fuck ton of sexy pistols. Nice models, nice sound effects, meaty impact, low time to kill. I could possibly cuddle up to most of the guns and use them as a teddy bear. Or sex doll. The gun balancing is a mixed bag. Mostly, the guns are kind of balanced in the rough direction of some kind of reality. Relative to each other. Mostly. But they are massaged for game balance, bringing them all closer to equivalence in base damage. A good example would be the 7.62mm NATO FAL rifle, which is correctly more powerful than the 5.56mm NATO M4A1. However, massaged down to be only barely more powerful. I guess because PvP balancing issues. The reality is that the FAL should be almost twice as deadly, with a bullet weighing 2 to 2.5 times as much, travelling with about twice the kinetic energy. I would say it should be vastly more powerful, not 12% more powerful. Forgive my shitty maths if I got that wrong. I'm a YouTuber after all. Facts aren't my strong point. I guess they're trying to keep things realistic and at the same time trying to balance the meta in PvP. I'm not one of those video games weapon guys, so don't trust my judgment. Fuck, if you came to my channel expecting some kind of scientific breakdown on the rounds to kill for each weapon, you clearly took a wrong turn on the internet and ended up lost and arriving here by mistake. This being said, even I can tell this ain't no simulator. And this is definitely video game balancing rather than reality balancing. But fuck it, they look sexy, have lots of mods, sound nice, the time to kill is fast, and to be honest, I've seen people make nearly every weapon work. Besides, when I inflict Call of Duty PvP on myself, I'm usually shit-faced and last on the leaderboards, so frankly, my tactical priorities are usually confined to how sexy my guns look, feel and sound. And how many claymores I can carry. Monetization and fuckery. Well, it's a good news, bad news scenario regarding monetization. The good news is that there is virtually zero monetization at launch. The bad news is that the good news is a fucking lie. A cunning deception by EA, so that during the launch, review and promotion window, there is no negative news to report about microtransactions. And about a month after launch, they are going to take a giant fist full of monetization and loot boxes and shove it so hard up our collective rectums that our eyes start to bulge out. Monetization and EA is a bit like getting a blowjob from an angry goat. Sure, it feels nice enough at first, but it's hard to relax when you know that it's just a matter of time before you feel the sharp shooting pain of jagged goat teeth champing down on your love pipe. This is the EA way now. Lull people into a false sense of security, and the second they relax, twat them with a ton of microtransactions when they least expect it. Prepare yourselves. The PS4 survival debacle enraged nearly everyone. I'm not really sure quite what possessed them to do this, but an entire game mode, survival, is PS4 only for year 1. And let's be honest, year 2 really means when the next sequel comes out. I don't know if this is just going to be a dicking for non-PS4 players, or if it's going to be on sale as DLC at some point. But it's total arse. That's what it is. The best way we can understand the monetization in this game, since they are not being honest and open about it, is to assume it's going to be as bad or worse than the previous game. And COD Blops 4 had a sight reticule, e.g. a 2 pixel wide red dot in the middle of your screen, on sale for $1. Not bad. Filling up your whole screen at that rate would cost approximately $518,000. Bargain! They did timed events. You could never win before the end. Monetised weapons. The game started out real nice and turned progressively into a giant fucking shit show. So yeah, let's assume this game will have horrible microtransactions arriving in time for Christmas. Like I said, it's like getting a blowjob from a goat. Trust me. So how did I find the PvP? I found it bewildering, overwhelming, everyone kept killing me, and I always got a horrible score. So, absolutely no change there then. It's pretty much like every other fucking Call of Duty. There are maps, there are modes, it's fast time to kill, and unless you have twitch reflexes and play obsessively, you're going to get completely fucked every time. The main huge difference is ground war. Battlefield has been trying to be Call of Duty for years, and now Call of Duty seems to be trying to converge on Battlefield. This game is a little bit like Battle COD. Sure, they have all the normal game modes too, but this time around the Maypole they have got Ground War, and I like it. Ground War is, allegedly, 32 versus 32 cross-platform, largish map Battlefield-style setups. I think there's only 3 maps at the moment, but it's all rather good fun. In Ground War, I'm not last on the scoreboard, so it's obviously less like normal Call of Duty and more balanced towards skillless fucks like me. I've heard some people complain that Ground War is a bit campy. Well, I've got a loadout called Happy Camper, where I camp on fast deploying claymores and carry a riot shield, so yeah, I reckon it's possible to camp just a little bit. That said, it's also possible to have a counter build that neutralises all of my dirty tricks fairly easily, so there is a lesson here, as per the Division. Mitigate, you lazy fucks. This said, what I do is not a patch on the monkey snipers hanging off the top of every tall structure, fast scoping everyone. But you know, war is hell.
Enemy care package inbound. Captured B.
Seriously though, if you're a shit player like me and you camp like a bitch, you will still get a shit score. People with the good scores are the best players, and just as usual, a significant proportion of players with the insane scores are cheating fucks. I'm just kidding. I'm sure not one single person ever cheats in a Call of Duty game. Although several recent studies have shown that well over 1 in 3 online players these days use cheats. Don't blame me for the harsh science truth bombs. Anyway, my point is, whether you're good at this game or shit like me, you can still have a lot of fun in the PvP. The Ground War maps are hilarious, but often involve you respawning and being sniped by some roof camper, respawning and getting shot in the back as you cross the road, respawning and then running around the corner and face planting into an enemy APC. There is a lot of random death, even by my standards. But Jesus fuck, it's fun. And the maps are interesting, and you can usually land on, climb up or booby trap anything. It's no match for the large battlefield maps, but it's a good approximation. Like a high quality, cheap Chinese knockoff. As always, my main issue with the multiplayer is that they crank out a new title every year, so it's hard to emotionally invest in the long gear grinds when you know damn well that the clock is already ticking down on a sequel that will effectively flush all of your hard-earned progress straight down the shitter. The player is basically building sandcastles that EA will promptly kick over in precisely 12 months' time. So what about the single player campaign? Here is the rub. If you make a game about modern asymmetrical warfare and the realities of modern terrorism and proxy wars, you are screwed however you do it. If you clean it up so as not to offend, you get shit for sanitising and glamorising war and human suffering. If you make it realistic, you get shit for being cruel and trivialising war and human suffering. Either way, you are fucked. But I'm glad Infinity Ward decided to be fucked for realism. Some dumb fuck seriously suggested this game was bad because there was no way to complete the story without killing anyone. Well, boo-hoo for their fundamental lack of understanding when it comes to the brutal realities of the world. As the man so famously once said, war is hell. The Apache helicopter scene is entirely reminiscent of and modelled on real cockpit footage from wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The simple and visceral nature of this scene did a brilliant job of demonstrating the nature of perspective in war. Many of us have seen that kind of brutal footage before, people dispassionately raining death down on helpless targets on the ground, flesh rendered asunder and body parts vaporised from many, many hundreds of metres away from a helicopter or plane lurking beyond sight. It's fairly dark stuff, even though you know the guys being killed are the enemy. Well, that's the plan at least. Well, this game does give you a good lesson in perspective. When you flip at one point from being one of the guys on the ground being attacked to the dude in control of the friendly helicopter, well, my perspective totally changed. I didn't give a flying fuck anymore. It was like Christmas. I happily gunned down every last enemy fuckbag that was attacking us. And when I had finished chowing down on that carnage, I went in for seconds and gunned down all the bastards running away too. I guess what I'm saying is this. Sometimes cold, dispassionate footage of warfare shows you the level of dehumanisation involved in war. But sometimes it humanises a bunch of chumps that might need to be shot. Not because they're bad people, but because if you don't shoot at them, they will kill you and your friends. I'm not saying war is good, or killing is good. I'm saying we should always try and avoid wars. But if you're in one, there's no point complaining that the enemy are getting killed in the process. Stop the fucking war. Don't blame the fucking combatants if they're just doing their jobs. Most soldiers don't really want to kill anyone. They want to get their job done and get home in one piece. So attacking a video game for what it represents, whilst typing on a laptop made by kids in a sweatshop, using plastics derived from stolen oil whilst drinking coffee sourced from third world peasant labour. Well, that's a special level of hypocrisy right there, and probably causing more harm than the average Allied soldier. In war, just like life, there are more morally grey areas than you might imagine, and the game does a fairly good job of flagging this up from time to time.
We make a good team.
Everyone is quoting this number 6 hours long, like it's a competition to finish it. Well, I might be shit, slow and constantly windowing out to take notes, but I thought this game was much longer than 6 hours. I personally can see myself doing this single player again at some point, so maybe I'll snort some Pro Plus and drip some energy drink into my eyeballs and try a speed run on easy. But frankly, I don't think I could finish this game in 6 hours unless I was rabid and high. I don't know if reviewers are just quoting other reviews, but fuck me, it took me longer than that. On the subject of difficulty settings, I played on normal. Generally, that was fairly easy as long as you paid attention, but I could tell immediately from the time to kill that on the hardest settings, this game is going to be unforgiving. I guess my overall view of the story is this. I enjoyed playing through it, but the way it was organised made it a bit piecemeal and scattergun. The characters were brilliant, and the visceral down-in-the-dirt feeling was superb, even though it felt a little bit muddled. Like someone took the coolest scenes from the best war films they've ever seen and edited them together into one movie. Each part is great in isolation, but it doesn't really flow together organically. Character story and progression was pretty much this. I'm a strong lady terrorist, and so are my sisters. I'm her morally weak brother, and I'm shitty. I'm a British soldier, and I'm odd. I'm the boss, and I'm grouchy as fuck, but really super sweet and forgiving like Captain Harold Doby. I'm some rando from Afghanistan, so I'm just fucking expendable. I have a dream, and that dream is suicide. Oh yeah, I get why the terrorist girl couldn't do that bit at the end now, or it would have looked like a jihadi death. Lol. I just said jihadi death lol in one sentence. What the actual fuck? That bit at the end of the game was super sweet and all, but surely it would have been easier to just go back to the truck and get another fucking detonator, right? Or just bomb the shit out of it from the air with that endless supply of drone Maverick airstrikes. But why let some common sense get in the way of a good story, eh? The single-player campaign was entertaining despite its flaws, and frankly, it was nice they got off their lazy arses and finished the single-player campaign this time around. I just wished they had got the time to finish off Captain John Price's facial modelling. He spends half the game with this facial expression like he's trying not to burp, and the rest of the game looking like he's already shit himself.
That's neat to know.
The press reception. The mainstream gaming news media these days basically engages in two primary activities. One, hyping games made by publishers that spend lots of advertising revenue with their publication. Or two, marauding around trying to find something to be offended about. Oh, there's three as well actually. There is shitting on video games made by the competitors of the publishers that spend lots of advertising revenue with their publications. Yeah, I said it. Modern Warfare seems at least to have fallen victim to the professionally offended journo flakes because they got all bent out of shape because the game contains some violence, some killing, and human suffering. White phosphorus kill streaks. My main response would be this. It's a war game where you run around killing people, like thousands of other games where you run around killing people. I don't really think this boils down to there being a nice and a nasty way to do it, because it's just a game. It's not a rape simulator, a racist simulator, or a pedo simulator. It's a video game about war, and that right there deals with 99% of the complaints. It's a game about war, therefore don't act shocked because it's got war in it. What were they expecting? A fucking dance-off? There are also accusations that the story writers have rewritten history to blame the Russians for the Highway of Death incident that occurred during the Gulf War, which they kind of did and kind of didn't. I can see why someone might level that accusation, but personally I thought that this story is an amalgam of vignettes inspired by multiple movies and real-life events, all strung together. If this game was meant to be a literal story based on real events, the complaint would be valid. But since this is a story weaved through a string of random and fairly unconnected mini episodes of war, well, not so much. I think it's worth noting that slight conceit, but it's not directly true, is it? I guess I can see why some Russians would be offended. Maybe. The real issue here is that the Highway of Death was incorporated into the story at all, and that it was named precisely as per the real-life incident. Don't make the mistake of thinking you understand what happened in real life from the news footage and a quick cursory gander at the Wikipedia page. That's the mistake I initially made. History was written by the winners. I'm not judging anyone on the ground or in the air who were just doing their jobs. The decisions made by the senior commanders at the time might have made complete sense at the time, but don't say the Highway of Death was legit. When 2,000 vehicles get stuck in a roadblock on the one solitary road in the middle of the desert with nowhere to go and nothing to drink, adopting the attitude of kill 'em all and let God sort them out is not really the conduct of a modern civilised society. And don't say they were all military vehicles that needed to be destroyed. Iraq only had 700 fucking tanks worth a damn at the time, and they weren't all in that one traffic jam. And besides, judging from the corpses of women and children and the kids' toys littering the roadside, I consider it highly fucking unlikely that Saddam Hussein, arsehole though he may have been, was crewing his armoured divisions with kiddies clutching teddy bears. The Highway of Death was a massive humanitarian fuck-up. It looked like an amazing target of opportunity, which ended up becoming a slaughterhouse. Many, many thousands of soldiers and innocent civilians alike were trapped. And it certainly looks like slaughter for slaughter's sake. The Allies declared a cessation of hostilities within a day of the massacre occurring. Dismissing the civilian deaths doesn't fly either. It was claimed that killing the civilians was fine because they were rapists and pillagers apparently. Well, many of them were also migrant workers, but what do I know? Iraq was practically a fucking ally the day before they invaded Kuwait, apparently because they misunderstood the instructions from a US envoy. How is it possible that on Thursday these were people we could do business with, but on Friday they were all now evil rapists and pillagers? Someone, somewhere, is bullshitting about something. I can't speak with authority about the Highway of Death based on a few days of research, but I know it's not been reported honestly. Contributing to that whitewash does everyone involved a disservice. Terrible things happen in war. I understand that, but it's our job to understand and learn from what transpires, not cover it up or contribute to a whitewash by casually perpetuating a fake narrative. I'm not saying there are necessarily things that are out of bounds or off limits to video games. I think people are free to do what they like, but are responsible for the consequences of what they do. To paraphrase someone much wiser than me, everyone has the right to go to a fancy dress party wearing an SS uniform. But when you get there, don't act surprised if they don't let you in because they assume you're a fucking Nazi. Modern Warfare made a fairground shooting arcade out of the location of a mass killing. They need to own that. Just like we as a civilization need to own what we did at the Highway of Death. We may not have intended it to turn out that way, but nevertheless, we were the countries that did it. As for the Russian man bad complaints, well, they have a bit of a point. But it's not like they're painting a picture of the Allied forces as fucking angels. During the course of this game, me and my buddies broke the Geneva Convention repeatedly and committed a few other war crimes on the fly too. That said, some of the depictions of Russians as brutish, sailor shirt wearing child killers was a bit overboard, and were more reminiscent of Red Dawn rather than Bravo 20. I guess in the final analysis there are some grounds to accuse Infinity Ward of historical revisionism and for making the bad guys Russians because they are the soft target right now. They are widely seen as the villains on the world stage. They invaded Ukraine, shot down a civilian airliner, been accused of meddling in Western elections, and they are a major player in the current shitstorm in Syria. And half of Scandinavia is preparing for a Russian invasion. Certainly, one scene in the game, to me at least, was entirely reminiscent of the Halabja chemical attack in Kurdish Iraq, but was rewritten to involve Russian soldiers who were perfectly chipper, going about their business, executing the men, women and children as they lay spluttering on the ground. In real life, the gassing of the Kurds was done by Iraq, had nothing to do with the Russians, and whilst it's too strong to say that Iraq was a Western ally at the time, let's just say the relationship was still rather cordial at that point. But all of this depends on whether you view the game as a string of mini stories strung together like beads to make a cool set of scenes inspired by films and real events, or whether you think they tried to tell a coherent, historically accurate story about conflict in the Middle East, and they decided to make the Russians into the baddies. Personally, I think it's clearly not meant to be a coherent historical story. For a start, high-level operators don't just tell their commanders to suck a fat one and go rogue and skip off on a vigilante mission, and then get invited back to lead an elite special forces unit. They get shot and left in a ditch, and their families get a letter saying they died in a tragic helicopter accident. One thing is sure though, they are definitely boxing clever with the narrative in the same way as Red Dead Redemption 2 did. They are being superficially earthy, brutal and realistic. But if you choose to scrutinise the narrative closely, they are squirreling around trying to avoid doing anything that might trigger people. Over specific gender and ethnicity issues, the game is basically dressing up like a horror movie psycho clown, but then giving out sweets to the kids at the party. Go watch a few other videos about this issue and see some other perspectives. I highly recommend Upper Echelon Gamer's video on the subject as a good starting point, and he offers some excellent insights into these issues, insights that become suddenly more persuasive when you see the market share breakdown for the various countries depicted in the game. Let's just say, given the low projected sales in Russia, it's no surprise they ended up as the fucking villains. One thing is, however, certain. At no point did Modern Warfare make any claim to be a historical document. So claiming that they rewrote history when they never claimed to be writing history is, basically to some degree or other, overreach. Who knows? Maybe this argument will sort itself out eventually. Perhaps someone will make a video game about the Russian front in World War II, and change the story so that the rape of nearly half of all females between Moscow and Berlin gets blamed on the British instead of the Russians. Then they can call it even. Overall, Modern Warfare is basically an okay deal if you know what you're getting into. I don't mind it because it's like a franchise delivery pizza or a classic big franchise burger. It's never going to be brilliant, but it's got enough salt, sugar and fat in the ingredients to satisfy your taste buds for a while, and it always arrives pretty much tasting the same. It's not fair to complain that a pizza isn't a 2-star Michelin meal, in the same way it's not fair to complain that Call of Duty is a vaguely bland but reliable shooter with a reasonable single-player campaign and a sufficient dose of angry PvP that you can keep playing until you have fluid draining out your ears. It delivers what it says on the box. The gritty and realistic depiction of human conflict represented in Modern Warfare presents some stark moral realities to the player. The big sweep of the PvE campaign is, dare I say it, a little bit politically correct in a way, but does steer the player into enough morally controversial situations and dilemmas to make it quite interesting at times, and trigger a bunch of overly sensitive and easily offended journo-tards. The game also, like any good war story, for both good reasons and bad, reignited some healthy debate about ethics and moral accountability in war. And these are debates society needs to be constantly engaged in. The game has triggered some very interesting discussions, resulted in some really interesting news articles and YouTube videos, and reviewing it has caused me to research some fascinating issues and have some incredibly insightful conversations. Just what can we justify doing to others in the name of protecting our interests and safety? To address an issue mentioned in the game, how far is it okay to get dirty so the rest of the world stays clean? And how is that working out for us? There is a theoretical question frequently posed to philosophy students. A steam train is coming down a railway track and there are 3 people tied to the rails. There is a set of points, and if you throw that lever, the train will be diverted down the other track. And there is only one person there tied to that track. But the catch is, it's a little infant. Do you trade 1 life to save 3? Or do you sacrifice the adults to save the child? Do you make a cold-hearted numerical decision or a moral one? Obviously, the correct answer is to run over all the adults, then back up the train, switch the tracks over and crush the fucking kid too. Then get the fuck out of there as fast as possible. You know, because it might be a trick question and you don't want any witnesses. Or you might get more points or something. Look, I don't fucking know what the correct answer is. I didn't study philosophy. Why on earth did these stupid fucks tie themselves to the tracks anyway? And why is there a steam train? It's not the fucking 1900s. Anyway, the point is that you can sit around in your comfy classrooms postulating about morals all you like, but most of the difficult shit gets done by people putting themselves in danger whilst under pressure, and they don't get to understand the cause and effect and see the bigger strategic picture. They just get given orders and take it on faith that the people telling them what to do are making the right choices. Life isn't like a Hollywood movie or a philosophy class. There are people doing nasty shit in the background to protect our way of life and reduce the risk of threats. Just because we don't know about it doesn't mean we should not be grateful. And just as importantly, responsible. Just because some people don't like to face that reality or condone it doesn't mean it's not real, or that it's wrong to depict it in video games. Just like it's presented in many of the films and TV shows from which these story elements were all derived. Despite a lot of complaints about this game, I believe that realism in games is a good thing. Showing the full horrors of today's theatres of war serves as a stark reminder to everyone that war is not romantic, glamorous or exciting. It's scary, and people shit themselves, and people die. And the biggest group of casualties, as ever, are almost always civilians.
Enemy shell turret on the field. Friendly IAV dropping in.
If I had to distill my opinion of the single player down to one sentence, I'd say this. It's realistic enough that some combat veterans may well find some of the scenes so close to reality that it's uncomfortable. Military historians, however, probably won't. If I had to distill my opinion of the multiplayer down to one sentence, I'd say this. It's the same old reskinned rodeo, with a few giant maps thrown in. The biggest single thing I took away from Call of Duty Modern Warfare was this. In a year where AAA publishers were tanking their favourite IPs, beloved franchises and their share value, Infinity Ward made a vaguely interesting, tactically controversial and slightly original game with a bit of polish. And it went to the top of the charts. How about them apples? Make a reasonable finished game and make good sales. Who'da thunk it? Certainly not him. Or him. Or him. I know some people are going to be shocked that I'm fairly sympathetic towards Modern Warfare despite its many issues. Don't get me wrong, if I gave it a score out of 10 I would give it -3. It would get 7 out of 10 for the game, -10 out of 10 for the microtransactions that will arrive just before Christmas. And make no mistake, they will arrive like a toxic cloud, so obnoxious it will make white phosphorus seem like a fucking mild inconvenience. So great job, Infinity Ward. You made a good game. But because EA sold the game, made an entire game mode, a PS4 exclusive, charges players for a battle pass, and will cram this game full of heinous microtransactions, I'm going to spare myself having to do another review later and simply punish them now for their inevitable crimes in the future. Call of Duty Modern Warfare gets a whopping -3 out of 10. Well earned. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.